Not deny that it is, a global famous wine now. When we came back in '88, Cloudy Bay was having its second vintage, and already people were just hot about those early wines. The analogy would be a bloody Bronco rider.
Sauvignon Blanc has put New Zealand on the world wine map, and anyone who denies that, it's being foolish.
It's the one variety that you can pick up a glass and you know actually what it is. It's very, very distinctive, it's very varietal, and just, great wine to drink with or without food, depending on the style.
We're a big driver of this variety in the international market, and we've got a lot to offer. It's extraordinary, and I've got to say I feel quite privileged to have been a part of it. Nearly 80% of the economic production of the New Zealand wine industry is about this variety.
We want to show that Sauvignon Blanc is an exciting variety that can have so many faces, so many different expressions based on where it's grown. I think the future is incredibly exciting, and 10 years down the track, looking forward to where we might be there.
I think we've got to be visionary. We've got to think 10, 20 years ahead.
Wairarapa Sauvignon Blancs, and Martinborough in particular, they're a distinctive take on the New Zealand distinctive style of Sauvignon Blanc. They tend to be, obviously all that vibrant, fresh fruit flavours that you would expect from New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, but quite subtle, very subtle, and they encompass a lot of the fruit spectrum. It has some lovely, ripe, fresh flavours, sort of passion fruit, and a little bit less of the herbaceousness, and really nice, subtle, versatile style of Sauvignon Blanc.
We, focused on a fruit-driven, pretty simple style of Sauvignon Blanc, a style that I kind of like to characterise as top of the South Island. You'd recognise it very clearly as Sauvignon Blanc. It's got those characteristics that everyone knows from Marlborough, and probably also would see those same characteristics in Sauvignon Blanc from Nelson. So we've developed that style. It's relatively punchy, fruit-driven, fresh, bright.
One of the big factors here is the northwest wind. So that's a strong, dry wind that comes across from Australia and has a big part to play as it hits the Southern Alps, comes and really drives some warm air through this part of New Zealand. As a winemaker, the type of style that we naturally get here, the fruit comes in with good phenolics. We use that to best effect, which is incorporating that in the style of the wine. So things like barrel fermentation, lees contact, all works quite well when you've got structurally potentially quite big fruit. And really with the natural phenolics of the fruit, you've got a nice starting point.
Sauvignon Blanc is obviously what New Zealand is known for internationally, because New Zealand has such a unique, intense varietal character, which is so distinctive, and I think that's part of the reason why it's so popular, is because it's so distinctive, it's so intense, and it's definitely put New Zealand on the map.
I think for the southern valleys you're getting more of that clay influence in the soils, and for us we're tending to get more minerality, kind of citrus characters through our wines. And for us at Dog Point, we're based, the majority of our vineyards all southern valleys based, so that minerality really does drive the backbone of all four of our wines. I think when you're getting out onto the Wairau Plain, out closer to the coast and on those free draining gravels, you're starting to get more tropicality coming into the wines. And then in the Aratri Valley with that compact sediment, you're getting more of the slightly herbaceous characters. And people are blending from around the region and getting this sort of overall profile that's incredibly attractive to consumers.
So Hawke's Bay is roughly halfway between Wellington and Auckland in terms of driving. So it would be about 5 hours to Auckland by car, 4 to Wellington, and we're on the east coast of the North Island, and that's one of the driest, warmest parts of the country really. So our Sauvignon style is probably a little different to what you might see in the South Island. I use when I'm out marketing our wines, saying our wines aren't quite as loud, like the volume's not quite as turned up as some of the Marlborough and other regions. We get riper fruit flavours earlier, and generally our alcohol's a little lower and food friendly, almost more European style.
I think it's actually quite a unique region in just the speed at which it has developed, and I guess a single-minded focus on one key grape variety which stands out so much on the world stage. I think we're in quite a unique position.
This is cool climate, and a lot of people lose sight of the fact that you're dealing with a late ripening variety in a cool climate area. You're working where, you know, with your own particular soils and your vineyards, and it takes years to get an understanding of all that. It doesn't happen overnight. 26,000 hectares in this region in 42 years is absolutely astounding.
Where we are, we're in the Rapara region. The Rapara region is defined by the Wairau River. For us, these stones are really important, these alluvial stones. We call them sunstones. They're kind of a wonder of nature. They warm up during the day. You can feel the warmth actually in the stones, and at night they radiate heat, and that gives us these kind of elevated night temperatures. Our Sauvignon Blancs are quite different. They tend to be a little bit more aromatic. They tend to be more passion fruity, a little bit more grapefruity. And they have this kind of minerality, kind of flintiness actually in the palate, and you have this real lovely line of acidity.
Traditional central Wairau Valley, stony, grey-wacky, stone driven. It is more mineral, it is subtler in its fruit aroma, and elderflower to the English, or guava to us, is the dominant fruit profile.
The Aratri Valley is located about 30 kilometres to the south of the Wairau Valley, and I guess there's about 30% of Marlborough's total production comes from the Aratri Valley. It's significantly cooler than the Wairau Valley, can be up to 10 degrees Celsius cooler during the day. And some of the sites within the Aratri Valley can have 25 to 28 degrees diurnal change between day and night in the middle of summer.
I was born in '83, so I was born at a time where there's a lot of replanting in the district, and then it's amazing where Marlborough's come in such a short time. What we're seeing now is capturing those sub-regions, capturing those flavours, and taking that to the consumer. And I think over the next 10 years, that's what we're going to be about.
I think New Zealand's a great place to practice organics and biodynamics, and Marlborough in particular has a lot of things going for it in that respect. Certainly sort of being on the Marlborough landscape, doing something totally different was a hindrance in the early days, but nowadays it's broken through, and I'm proud to be part of something that's been one of the sort of pioneers of that, certainly in this region.
I think so. From the climate-wise, it's just we have always cool nights here, hot days, a lot of sunny days, and even the soil here is different to other regions here in New Zealand. Marlborough was always on my number one for New Zealand region. So we have Hawke's Bay, this time Marlborough and Nelson, and the decision was for me was Marlborough was the best place to be.
The flavour profiles you actually get from Sauvignon Blanc are quite diverse. Where we are here, they tend to be quite aromatic and quite lifted and very passion fruity, but you can go 10, 15, 20 minutes down the road and the wines can be quite green, they can be quite grassy. You go to another part of Marlborough and they can be full of gooseberries. So there's quite a diversity in wine styles you're actually getting from Marlborough, and that's kind of the magic you get from the Marlborough region.
Hawke's Bay is one of the oldest regions in the land for winemaking. A lot of the region's quite cool, and as we go further south in our sub-region we have climates much more suited to the cool varieties like Sauvignon, like Pinot Gris, Riesling, and even Pinot Noir.
We're in the North Island, east coast of the North Island, slightly warmer climate. Hawke's Bay Sauvignon Blanc is more tropical fruit, citrus sort of characters, definitely a softer acid profile.
And the climate is very different in the Warrappa opposed to Wellington, for example. It's very warm during the day in summer, but very cool at night. In the springtime though, well, it's predominantly very windy, which also contributes to the style of wines we make here.
Gladstone Vineyard to me, after moving here from Tukaranga and Martinborough, Gladstone as a region is a little bit cooler. It's slightly slower ripening, seems to develop more flinty characters, and the texture that we get from Sauvignon Blanc here is magic.
We in Nelson make a pretty sort of recognisable top of the south style Sauvignon Blanc, and so Sauvignon Blanc is a big part of what is produced in Nelson. In fact, Nelson produces a range of varieties really well. We do Chardonnay extremely well, Pinot well, aromatics. In terms of the region, I think the majority of Sauvignon Blanc comes out of the Waimea Plains as opposed to the Moutere Hills, and particularly Sauvignon does really well down here on the plains.
I planted grapes with great confidence in this region, and then so we were basically the first people in the South Island what planted grapes here. I think the cool growing conditions and the long time in the vineyard between flowering and harvest. That's our secret.
Here in Waipara, 650 mil of rain and yeah, plenty of sunshine hours as well. So we have quite distinct seasons. One of the big factors here is the northwest wind. So that's a strong dry wind that comes across from Australia and has a big part to play as it hits the Southern Alps. Our job is to naturally work with that. So using the characters of the fruit to mould it into a certain style of wine that we feel suits our style as well as the region and our vineyard.
There's certainly a number of styles coming through with more winemaking artifact, so whether that's the use of oak or malo or wild fermentation. I think the wines, there's a whole range of wines which are now much more textural and more food wines. It's through very judicious winemaking that people express the best out of their little parcel of land.
I like to think of Sauvignon as something you can build complexity in. I like to describe the way that we make wine as the antithesis of of what people consider to be Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc. Hand-picked, wild yeast, old barrels, Semillon, all those little things to add some texture to bring something, sort of more dimension to a, relatively sort of simple grape variety.
I really like the action of barrel and leaf stirring and creaminess and like a peaches and cream style Sauvignon Blanc. We can't do Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc here because we're Hawke's Bay. So we're just trying for a more complex style.
The Sauvignon Blanc portion of the Sauvignon Semillon, we don't have a clear juice, so that it gets a lot of nice funky extra complexity there. And we age both varieties on yeast lees for 10 months before they get blended. That helps to give a rich, full, creamy mouthfeel.
We're really stoked to be making an interesting Sauvignon, a Sauvignon that we enjoy to drink, so, and it feels right making that Sav. The other style just didn't do it for us.
As a winemaker, it's just so nice to work with different techniques to build the wine in a slightly more kind of calculated way with a set of winemaking decisions, creating a number of elements which can then be worked with and put together in different ways to create a style of wine.
Talking about at the moment, and obviously there's a big push with low alcohol wine, with funding from a number of wineries and from New Zealand wine growers to create these lifestyle wines.
Well, I guess with Lee's fermentation, what we're looking for is that solids influence. So we're getting texture and palate weight, but still retaining freshness in the wine. And for us, we tend to get that flinty funk coming into the wines. And it's a fine balance. We don't want too much of it because we still want to capture those aromatics of Marlborough, but we're trying to add a degree of interest, and we're finding that yeasty funk, just a subtle element of it is a really attractive trait. It's letting it go through its process, and it is, getting that balance is important. You can go too far one way, so for us, we're trying to have a little bit of positive corruption, but not too much.